Don't cross the stream.
Anybody else want to negotiate?
Not make a sound until I tell you to run.
Are you trying to make me look stupid in front of the other guests?
You need any help from me, sir?
That's right.
Welcome to Is It Streaming, the podcast where we pick a movie from the endless queue and help you decide if it's a hidden gem, a waste of time, or worth adding to your watch list. Today we are discussing the 2004 action thriller film Man on Fire. I am your host, Kevin Rossi, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Silvia Graziano. Silvia, hello.
Hello, Kevin. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm very excited to talk about this movie, Man on Fire, starring Denzel Washington, directed by Tony Scott. How are you feeling about it?
As always, I have feelings about films. So this was a first watch for me, and I have to say there were parts that I really liked and parts I really didn't like. So this is going to be a fun conversation.
Well, Sylvia, should we just sit here having the conversations by ourselves and not introduce our co-host and have him sit quietly in the corner?
We could just have this.
Yes, that works for me. I can just have a day off. That's great.
That's right. Of course, we are also joined by our other co-host, John Mostis. John, how are you and how are you feeling about Man on Fire?
Well, first I'm going to say, wow, this movie is right up Sylvia's genre, kind of, right? And it's definitely not in my genre. And to hear her come right out of the barrel here and say like mixed feelings, I'm really curious. It's really kind of fun because we don't really talk a lot about the movies before the podcast, and but that's really I'm excited to talk about it too. So this is Kevin's pick this week. I'm going to rat you out and say it's your pick. And so it's interesting. Why did you pick this film?
You know, it's kind of been a running theme, honestly, is that I'll see something like pretty much on Netflix or some type of streaming thing. I'm like, oh, let's go. And then I'll watch it. I'll be like, we should do this on the podcast. So this is the same thing with Man on Fire. And John, I'm actually going to steal your line here. I'm going to let the listeners know that this movie is currently streaming on Netflix. And also a little tidbit, they are also doing a reboot of this as a series because this is based off of a book. And come to find out, it's actually a 5-book series starring this character, John W. Creasy, which is played by Denzel Washington. So it'll be very interesting to see how that series is.
Is that in production or what?
They already have trailers for it on Netflix. Like there's advertisements for it.
Oh.
Yep. So we'll see.
Wait,
We'll
there's
see.
advertisements for a sequel?
They're rebooting it as a series. So apparently there's a 5-book series that they're going to be doing on Netflix.
The ending of this film is different from the book.
Yes. And we're going to get into some of the discrepancies about who influenced who and whether or not these people are real. And there seems to be a lot of confusion, including Tony Scott himself. But yes, the film has a 7.7 rating on IMDb. And the logline is, in Mexico City, a former CIA operative swears vengeance on those who committed an unspeakable act against the family he was hired to protect. And as we said before, Man on Fire is directed by Tony Scott and stars Denzel Washington, Dakota Fanning, Christopher Walken, Radha Mitchell, Mickey Rourke, Mark Anthony, and Giancarlo Giannini.
Good job pronouncing that.
I appreciate that because I literally was doing the run through in my head multiple times. Thank you, Silvia, for noticing. The film had a budget of $70 million and production took place in Mexico City and surrounding areas in the spring of 2003. Filming lasted for 5 months and wrapped in early September. This film was shot by cinematographer Paul Cameron. You may know some of his other work, his earlier work, such as Gone in 60 Seconds and Swordfish. He would later go on to film Collateral, starring Tom Cruise and directed by Michael Mann. Have either of you seen that film?
Collateral?
Yeah,
I don't
Collateral.
think so.
I have not.
Oh, man. Jamie Foxx and Tom Cruise. I suggest everyone should go watch this. I would say this is probably Michael Mann's second or third best film other than Heat. And Tom Cruise plays a hitman. Jamie Foxx plays a cab driver. It's a fantastic film. Also, some very cool cinematic tricks as far as how they did the lighting and everything like that. It's really good.
Oh, you're comparing it to Heat? Okay, that's a big deal.
Yeah, I would say it's probably Michael Mann's second or third best film. I would say Manhunter is another one that's really good. But also Deja Vu is another one that he would end up shooting in 2006, which was also directed by Tony Scott and starring Denzel. And Man on Fire wasn't the first or the last collaboration that Tony Scott would have with Denzel. Their first outing began in the 1995 film, any guesses? Submarine film?
Oh.
Gene Hackman?
Nope, close. No.
There was a lot of submarine films in the mid-90s.
Yeah.
Crimson Tide.
Oh yes, Crimson Tide.
Crimson
Yes.
Tide. Yes.
So that was their first
I can
outing
picture
together.
Gene Hackman in it now.
Yes, exactly. It's a great film. Their follow-up to that is this episode's film, Man on Fire. They would go on to film 2 more movies together, Deja Vu, which is really good, which I just mentioned, and finally the 2009 remake of The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3. So speaking of remakes, as we said before, Man on Fire is also a remake, even though they're remaking as a series. The original film starring Scott Glenn and Joe Pesci was released in 1987. And both movies are based off of the book of the same name, which was written by A.J. Quinnell and released in 1980. The book was inspired in part by the kidnapping of John Paul Getty III in Rome. Now, John, Silvia, are either of you familiar with the Getty family?
Yes.
You are?
Yes. And well, I remember, so because this is related to Italians, my father was completely obsessed with the story, so I heard a lot about it through him. And then, of course, Tony Scott's brother makes an actual film.
Yes, which we will talk about.
Wasn't John Paul Getty the richest man in the world for a while?
Yeah. Getty.
You guys knew a lot more than I did before researching this. I didn't know any of this stuff. So John Paul Getty, the first, was the founder of Getty Oil, and as John said, was once considered the richest man in the world. John Paul Getty III was his grandson and was famously kidnapped in Italy in 1973 and held for ransom. The interest in this kidnapping not only inspired A.J. Quinnell to write Man on Fire, the book, it also inspired Tony Scott's brother, famed director Ridley Scott, to make the 2017 movie All the Money in the World, starring Christopher Plummer, Michelle Williams, and Mark Wahlberg. This seems to be the 5 degrees of John Paul Getty III revolving around this film.
And there's too much talent in one family there, the Scott family, having a little corner on the market there.
I mean, I think the only other brother directors I can think of, or actually, no, I guess we have a couple, right? So I was going to say Lord and Miller, but I believe they're not brothers. They're just a directing duo. But the only other brothers I can really think are the Safdie brothers.
Well, Coen brothers, right?
Oh, you're
Coen
right. Of
brothers.
course, who could forget the Coen brothers?
Yeah, how you forget the actual
There's
Coen
a lot
brothers.
of like brothers that are like tandem duos, right? But not a lot of individuals.
The film was originally set in Italy, but Tony Scott decided to shift it to Mexico City.
Man on Fire 22 years ago was set in Italy because Italy was the kidnap capital of the world, and the studio 20th Century Fox wanted to shoot the 2004 version in Italy as well. I think really because they wanted to have, the studio execs wanted to have, take the girlfriends to like Como and Rome and Venice and stuff, yeah. But anyhow, but I felt if I'd shot this version of Man on Fire in 2004 in Italy, it had to be a period piece because there's maybe 3 or 4 kidnappings a year in Italy, or in Europe actually, right now. Whereas in Latin America, there's 1 kidnapping every 60 minutes, and in Mexico City, our first week there were 24 kidnappings in 6 days.
Now, as for the inspiration for Denzel's character, John W. Creasy, who's a retired war veteran, there is quite a lot of debate. Director Tony Scott will tell you that this is based on a real-life former CIA agent who went after a kidnapping ring in Italy in the 1970s. I did my best to find out who this person might be, but I was unable to substantiate any connection whatsoever to a real former CIA officer or anything that was surrounding it. Author A.J. Quinnell, who wrote the book, has said that the character is based on people he knew in Africa and in Vietnam in the 1960s and 70s. So just in case when you hear further in the episode, Tony Scott speaking as if the CIA person is real, who knows, he might have been. But listeners, if you know any more information regarding this person, please let us know, because we would love to be able to corroborate some of those claims.
He seems like kind of an amalgamation of all these different kind of, a little bit of a tropey stereotype of, hey, I've been through war, I've got a lot of issues kind of thing. I'm born on the 4th of July, all these characters that have issues coming out of CIA and war and so forth.
Yeah, it seems much more like a caricature. Well, a combination / caricature of a lot of things. So I would really like to know if it was actually based on someone, because in my research, it almost seemed like before I knew about the Getty family, I was like, oh, it's going to be a guy that went after the kidnappers of the Getty son. And no, it wasn't. So I'm not sure who Tony Scott is actually speaking of. But as we talked about, this film is based on the book and is a remake. It turns out Scott had originally been tapped to direct the first film. And here's the story told by producer Scott Lucas.
I was using Man on Fire, which is a book that I had read very early in my career, to pitch to other writers for other projects. I was pitching them why this was a great character and we should try to emulate this character in other projects. And at some point I woke up and I realized, I should just make Man on Fire. I should just remake that movie. It's such a great story. I can never duplicate the character relationships that I was so interested in. And I was really taken with the book. And when it was the right time, we set out to do that. Tony had developed Man on Fire before it was made. When it was originally a book, he had developed it in between his first movie, The Hunger, and his next movie, Top Gun. I was talking to Tony about another project, and he asked me what I was working on, and I said, I'm working on this thing, Man on Fire, and he said, I was the original director of that movie, and I said, you're kidding, I have a script, you should read it. We talked about a kind of different version of the movie from the one that I had developed, taking the character, but sort of treating it a different way. And Tony had a history of developing scripts and had a mature idea of how he thought these characters should be and whatever. And I had learned some things from developing it as well. So we ended up hiring Brian Helgeland to write what became the greenlit draft of the movie.
Now, John and Silvia, any guesses as to why Tony Scott did not end up directing the original version of this film?
He probably got too busy.
I think so. If I recall, because of the timing of this, The Hunger was his very first film, right?
Correct.
Yes. Okay, so I love The Hunger, but I know it's a cult favorite now. It is not a very great film, but come on, David Bowie and
I've never seen it. I didn't even know David Bowie was in it. I'm definitely going to have to watch it.
Oh yeah. No, it has a cult following now. So, Catherine Deneuve and David Bowie star in it. It's about vampires, so you got that. But that didn't do very well when the film first came out. So I think people didn't have a lot of faith in Tony Scott.
Silvia, you absolutely nailed it. They did not think he had the directing chops to direct something so dramatic. So he had to go out and prove himself with Top Gun and all these other films. And then obviously, by the time he came around to remaking this film, he was such a director of high esteem. He can pretty much make whatever he wants. But great job, Silvia. You absolutely nailed it.
Yes.
So we've already discussed that the Scott brothers, Tony and Ridley, both have made films revolving around John Paul Getty III Kidnapping, which inspired this film. The connections revolving around this movie also involve Quentin Tarantino and the film's screenwriter, Brian Helgeland.
I got called by Sanford Panich, who works at New Regency, asking me if I would read the book for Man on Fire. He said that to me, and I said, I know that title, but I couldn't place it. And he said it had been made into a film once before with Scott Glenn. And the weird thing was when I used to live in by LAX, and the video store I used to go to was the one Quentin Tarantino worked at. And one time I was in there when Quentin Tarantino still worked in the video store, and I asked him what was a good movie to rent, and he told me I should watch Man on Fire with Scott Glenn, which is how I had seen the movie in the first place. I used to just be a screenwriter, but I've switched over to directing, so I don't really write anymore. And he had said that Tony Scott's going to direct it, and I didn't know Tony, but I was like, I'm not really in the mood to write for somebody else. And he said, well, just look at it, just read the book, because the book's a lot different than the movie. And I read the book, and I liked the book even more, but I wanted to direct it myself, basically. And Sanford told me that if Tony passed and didn't want to do it, because he had another movie that he was maybe going to do, that they'd put me on as the director. So I don't know if that was a lie or not, but I believed him, and so I wrote the script hoping Tony would say no so that I could direct it. But it didn't work out that way.
So as we just heard, unfortunately for Helgeland, he didn't get a chance to direct the film. But it is very interesting to hear that Tarantino had a hand in getting this film into the world of Brian Helgeland. This isn't the only time that Tarantino has had a hand in films by Tony Scott. Now, John, can you think of any other films that might fit this category?
A hand of getting films into the hands of Tony Scott? Well, of course, there's True Romance, one of my all-time favorite movies, which is very interesting to me that how differently True Romance ends and how differently Man on Fire ends because they're polar opposites, and it was Tony Scott's decision both times. So it's interesting.
That is very interesting because I was almost going to be like, well, in my head when you were saying that, I was like, oh, well, he didn't write the script for that. But that's interesting. So he changed up the ending from the script of Tarantino for that.
Yeah, Tarantino hated that. He did not like the ending of the movie True Romance. Whereas it's interesting, this book ends with is it spoiler time? It's spoiler time, folks, so close your ears. This book ends with the death of our main protagonist here. And it originally was written so he lives. And so Tony Scott said, screw it, I'm going to kill him off. And then, but for True Romance, he did the exact opposite, where Tarantino wanted Clarence Worley to die at the end, but he said, no, we're going to make it a happy ending. So it's just interesting to see how he wove those two stories very differently.
Yeah, he didn't want the Bonnie and Clyde kind of ending, right? Where, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Didn't eventually Quentin Tarantino come around and actually like ultimately agreed with Tony Scott later down the line? Like, you know what?
He did, because I read an interview recently that was saying that he actually did enjoy the film that he made. So that's why I was kind of interested. But you can understand, this was very early in Tarantino's career. I believe that was the first script or the second script that he had sold, right? So you're selling this off, and then obviously that's kind of the perils of being a screenwriter, right? Once you sell off the thing, the director and the studio can do whatever the hell they want with it. But it's cool to see that he had a coming to Jesus moment. That's pretty cool. Yeah.
And Tarantino, I think, has a great appreciation for, let's just say, European cinema, where the hero dies in the end, and that makes it that much more awesome, which it does usually.
There's like a little bit of that martyrdom that you get. It's a classic ending. It's a classic way to sort of have your character just, instead of riding off into the sunset, they're just bleeding out.
Exactly.
But Tony Scott said, "This is an American film. Damn it, we're gonna end this film that way." But again, in this one, I think he made the right decisions for this character, to close the story, to close the chapter, to give it a nice full circle at the end.
Yeah, I think if they left it open, I mean, obviously the book is 105, so clearly he doesn't die at the end of that one. But yeah, I mean, this would be kind of weird to have him live the end. It would have kind of like killed the vibe, I think, of the character of Denzel, because I mean, there's a lot of talk about paying a penance, right, for the horrible things that they have done. Him and Christopher Walken in their line of work being, veterans of war.
On the other side of that argument, though, I'm sure I absolutely know there were 100 producers saying, we need a sequel. We can't make a sequel with a dead guy. So unless we do like a zombie film like Silvia would love, so Tony Scott, I'm sure he had a uphill battle saying like, no, I want to end it here. I know it's going to be a big hit, but I only want to make one of them. Producers don't like that.
And I wish that they would kind of lean into that a little bit more. I just think that's better storytelling than creating a whole franchise around a character that, like, ultimately you're like, this person was meant to die. This was their character arc. This is ultimately what they wanted. That's the thing. Don't go against the character arc. Like you're going against the character's grain. And I think the ending for Man on Fire is an appropriate ending for Creasy.
Absolutely. And I would say the whole argument of art over profit is something, that all of, people that truly love cinema would love to see the studios actually adhere to. So speaking of that, Man on Fire was released in 2004 to mixed reviews and made $130 million at the box office on a $70 million budget. So not too bad. Although it had mixed reviews, the movie was a huge success in the home video market, making over $123 million in VHS and DVD sales. I would say that's probably a pretty good testament to art over profit right there.
Can I give you a question here, Kevin?
Yeah.
$70 million is a pretty hefty budget. What costs so much?
Short answer, the cameras and the film. And we will get into that. It's pretty insane. Sometimes they are shooting with up to 11 cameras.
I mean, it's all that frenetic energy that you have. That camera movement.
Yep.
Sylvia's favorite.
That's a great segue, Silvia. Now, Silvia, why don't you set the stage for us?
The film opens in Tony Scott's signature experimental style. Grainy, high contrast, often overexposed images flash across the screen. Jump cuts, rapid edits, exposure flares, and distorted colors fracture the frame. Distorted church bells echo beneath the visuals. Opening credits appear over fragmented footage. The imagery feels chaotic and unsettling, suggesting violence, instability, and emotional distress. Text appears on the screen, emphasizing the scale of the kidnapping crisis. There is a kidnapping every 60 minutes in Latin America. 70% of the victims do not survive. The message is blunt, unforgiving, and this will not be a calm or conventional action film. It feels restless, haunted. The film cuts to John Creasy arriving in El Paso, Texas, near the US-Mexico border. He is traveling south toward Mexico City. Inside a moving car, he watches the city pass by. Outside the window, gridlocked traffic, crowded streets, police, soldiers, coils of barbed wire. Luxury cars glide past street vendors and collapsing slums. Wealth and poverty collide in the same frame. The camera shakes, the lighting is harsh, shots arrive in fragments. Sound layers over sound, horns, radios, voices, engines, melding into a constant, suffocating roar. Mexico City is not romanticized. It is represented as overwhelming, relentless, oppressive. Creasy watches silently. He doesn't smile, he doesn't react, he doesn't engage. His face is empty, emotionally numb, and he is not curious, not hopeful, not excited. He is simply existing, waiting for something, anything, to anchor him. He meets his old friend, Paul Rayburn. Rayburn's humor is gentle, slightly eccentric, and it carries the weight of a shared history, of memories from a time before both men were worn down by violence and regret. Rayburn sees Creasy as a man lost and drifting. He offers him a job as a bodyguard. This is where Creasy's new journey begins, and we see how far he is willing to go.
Frenetic energy that takes place showing Mexico City, it, like you said, Sylvia, it does not paint it as any kind of nice. Like, I've been to Mexico, it's lovely, but it was not like the chaos that was there. And I think in addition to that chaos of the city, we go into the mind of Denzel's character, where he doesn't barely even know where he is. It seems like he's kind of like half drunk, half aware of what's happening, and going into kind of a unfamiliar territory. So it's very well displayed there, Sylvia.
Thank you. And, one thing I actually, was thinking too, is that what we do get from that character right away is that we do see him drinking. He has a flask. And I didn't mention that in the opening, but it is a character trait here. He has a relationship with alcohol that's a little destructive.
We see this kind of formula a lot, right? There's a horrible past of some sort. Often we don't know what it is. In this case, we assume that he did some kind of CIA operation that maybe went bad and had to do some things he has to deal with now mentally, and then turns to drugs or alcohol or some other kind of self-abusing behavior. So it's not a new trope, but I think Denzel, I was surprised at how much I liked Denzel in this movie, because he's normally got a little more of a flippant style to him. That's a terrible word for Denzel, but he played the I'm a hurt, lonesome drunk pretty well, being Denzel Washington and looking amazing and all the things that go along with Denzel. But right away you felt, okay, this is a guy who's in pain. He was very subdued and very quiet, didn't smirk a lot. So I like that a lot.
Yeah, and that's interesting that you say that, John, because I think I understand what you're saying about his typical character, because he's coming off of Training Day, where he plays like a very flippant, like, oh, I'm just a train that's barreling down here, and it's like, I only have, I got tunnel vision, and he's going to push off every other character. So I completely understand where you're coming from with that. And also, I think, we love talking about these opening scenes because opening scenes have so much to do. They have to engage the audience so that they don't turn away. It has to set the pace and tone of the movie. And I think this opening scene where you're seeing this kidnapping happen, I think it really does set a great tone visually, but also it lets you in on kind of this underworld of kidnapping in Mexico City and kind of shows you, these are the steps to this system that they have for these kidnappings.
This opening sequence is obviously it's the DNA of a kidnapping. It's the DNA of one of many kidnappings. And I originally shot the sequence as a full-blown continuity sequence, a full-blown story. And I was intending to open the film with a little 6-minute story, more of a straightforward look at a 21-year-old being kidnapped. It's a process that I go through. The process is, I began my life as a painter and I continue to function in film like I did as a painter. And it's all about making choices. And the choices we made was to take the sequence and make it into a title sequence. And the idea was just to give you a taste of the world you're about to enter, the taste of the world you're about to embark upon.
Yeah, so it's very interesting to hear Tony Scott talking about having to cut down this much longer sequence in order to fit the story and establish the kidnapping narrative while also keeping the pace up. And as filmmakers, all of us, this is kind of like, where you're leaving your babies on the cutting room floor, but you're doing it for the greater good of the film.
Kevin, you're being nice. The phrase is killing your babies. So
yes.
but you don't want to use
killing your babies.
It's like we're doing a podcast. Let's not say that.
Kill that baby, John. Go ahead. Kill that baby.
I will say he probably was facing that decision of saying, hey, I've got this big 15-minute sequence that has nothing to do with the plot. It's just a random person that gets abducted. And yeah, of course, it sets the scene. But I need to make it happen in 30 seconds because otherwise we have a 4-hour movie.
And I do agree. I think what it's trying to do, obviously, set the tone of this whole film. It's going to have that frenetic energy throughout the entire kind of story. But also, I think the similarities, viewers, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think with the Getty kidnapping as well, didn't they also cut off his ear, I believe?
Yes, correct.
So
yep.
A very similar thing. It's mirroring a lot. I think he's supposed to be kind of a representative sort of I think he's supposed to be like a symbol of the Getty character. And then diving into the fact that in Latin America, there's a kidnapping every 60 minutes. That is crazy. Wow. No wonder people are stressed out and, upset and honestly, you'll do anything that you can to get your children back.
I like that later we get into your kidnapping insurance is going to go way up if you don't have a bodyguard. That's
kidnapping insurance, that's...
You got to get your kidnapping insurance. And John, as an insurance salesman, I can only imagine what those kidnapping premiums are.
I would have to check Mexico City right now. I don't know the current rates in Mexico City for kidnapping insurance.
Amazing. And the other quite apparent thing, which I think we have all talked about, is that, we are establishing the visual tone of the film. And Tony Scott's films have quite a heavy lift for their cinematographers, such as Paul Cameron. And he will tell you about all of the cameras and techniques that they used on this film.
It's based on, traditional hand cranking, which is, a camera with a crank on the side that, in the past, a man was paid for his ability to keep the camera going at 24 frames per second. And what we're doing, and it's funny because we both shot a lot of hand crank independently. I shot a lot of it before I met Tony and then worked with him, and we did a few commercials hand crank. And what we're doing in this film is we're taking it to another level. And I'm using multiple exposures, 2, 3, 4, 5 exposures at any given time on certain sequences. So literally rolling the film forward, backward, different speeds. Just coming up with some techniques that kind of reflect the tension and emotional quality of Denzel's character. We have a few cameras here. We've got a few sound cameras, a couple of high-speed ARRI cameras. We're shooting with Panavision XLs, the smaller ones for maneuverability on the sound, ARRI 435s for high speed, and then we've got 2 or 3 16mm cameras as well that we're also incorporating into these photographic techniques. And we have the 2 hand cranks. So we have a little more cameras than the studio is happy about, but we're also using them every day on a daily basis. So we shoot a lot of film. We shoot all of our cameras all the time. Multiple cameras is just insane. You try to keep everything on a certain axis of light and action, but inevitably what happens is some cameras end up facing each other, and you've got a lot of stuff where you've got things that are or compromised by light or eye lines or things. And so the problem is by facilitating with a lot of cameras, you get a lot done, you have a lot of match action, you're getting performances as they happen, but then all of a sudden you may not have the best light, you may not you may be a little more profile on a close-up or something than you need to be, so there's give and take when you use multiple cameras. Outside of that, it's a nightmare. Different film stocks, different exposures, different filters.
That's awesome. I just love hearing that they shot with so many cameras. I also, like, one of my things, I've filmed a number of things, and I often have people that are very much purists, and they're like, well, we worked with this camera, so we have to work with that camera only for the rest of the shoot. And to me, I've always been like, no, you've picked the right camera for the right shot, and sometimes the color science might not match, but if it's a different scene or a different reason to use it, then go for it. Let's have fun with this. But to hear that they were using this for double and triple and quadruple exposures, which is basically where they're taking the film and running it back through and then filming back over the film that they've already filmed. That's fascinating. They must have blown a ton of cash on just the film costs. And Kevin, do you know what kind of films they used?
35 millimeter film and 16 millimeter film are the main things, but a ton of different film stocks, a ton of different post-processing techniques that I think we have a clip later of Tony Scott talking about in order to get those saturated colors. But I mean, on a lot of these, he's shooting 7 to 11 cameras at a time. And I mean, that's so many feet of film. It must have been like a few million feet of film for this movie. And it's just, I can only imagine having to keep all of that together, especially from like an editor standpoint. You would have, it's almost that thing where it's like when you get in the edit room, and John, we've talked about this multiple times. First of all, when you're shooting with multiple cameras, you're thinking, okay, great, we're going to get all these shots and it's going to be great. It's like, yes, it is, but it takes a shit ton of time in order to set up 2 shots that are both going to be usable. So I guess on the film sets we've been on where we're, shooting, we only have 2, but I mean, I guess that kind of gets thrown out the window when you have 7 to 11. You're like, oh, at least we'll get, 3 or 4 that are going to be usable. But it's like, man, that's so much time there. And then also you got to catalog the film. You got to load it into your editor. And then it's this chaos of having so many different choices. I actually don't know if I would like that being the editor on one of these films. It would just be so much to take in. You'd have to really rely on, first of all, your script supervisor, your DIT that's taking in all the footage and logging it. And then also you're going to have Tony Scott in there the whole time directing you on exactly what his chaotic, hectic brain is looking to actually get on screen. Because, I mean, between all these cameras, there's 5 different versions or 10 different versions of every scene.
It feels like it ends up being multiple directors.
Yeah, and not to mention there's 3 editors on this film, and Tony Scott did that on purpose to have different styles for different parts of the film.
The dailies must have just been beyond, like, just going through the dailies every day would be like, okay, we've got 6 hours of dailies for you from the day before because we shot 7 cameras. But this reminds me of the movie Home Alone, where the cinematographer for the movie Home Alone started off, he was very young in the business, I believe, and check my math on this, but and he wasn't sure he was going to get everything he wanted on his main camera, so he made a secondary camera called the chicken shit camera, which was just like, hey, put something over there just in case we miss something. And after a while, they started realizing that those random cameras had a better shot and a better look. So he was like, from now on, our A camera is our chicken shit camera. He had called it the chicken shit because, he wanted to make sure they didn't miss things. But Tony Scott took it to a whole different level where they had 7 or 8 cameras. Yeah, I guarantee you they had way too much footage. But I guarantee they probably have like 4 other movies that they could make from all the extra film that they shot.
And now that we've established that in the opening sequence that this film revolves around kidnapping, this now leads us into the introduction of Denzel Washington and his character John W. Creasy, who's a retired war veteran, and he's brought to Mexico and into the world of being a bodyguard by his friend, Paul Rayburn, played by Christopher Walken.
That's right, a bodyguard. Your Spanish is good enough.
You're crazy.
You even looked the part.
My state, I couldn't go out a corpse.
It's rich guys flashing their cash. It's all for show. Nothing's gonna happen.
Yeah? You think they'd hire a drunk, a has-been?
You have to keep it under control.
And what if there was, just say a kidnapping attempt? What do I do then?
You do your best. They're not gonna be paying you enough to perform miracles.
Now that scene is such a brilliant scene. There is so much, it's not exposition, obviously, but there's so much information in that scene visually and through the dialogue, and also just the connection between Denzel and Christopher Walken. I mean, one of the things that you definitely notice right off the bat is that Denzel is open about his alcoholism, right? And they show him pouring his flask into, his little cup there. And Christopher Walken's like, you got to keep it under control. But what do? They have this really tight insert shot with this great sound effects on there of him emptying the entire flask during that conversation. It's just like, this guy isn't just pouring it out a little bit. This is probably the first flask or probably the third flask of the day at this point.
I like this scene a lot. My one criticism in regards to the dialogue in the script itself is that I almost wish that Denzel didn't describe himself as an alcoholic, that we obviously see it, and that Rayburn just comments on the fact, like that line that he says to him, he's like, you got to keep it under control. If we could just if that exchange happened, I feel like it'd be like this perfect, I don't know, be like a perfect moment, at least to me, because it's a lot more showing than telling.
Yeah, that might have been that choice of the director or the writer to basically say, hey, audiences aren't always as perceptive as we want them to be. They might not know what a flask is or whatever. Let's just have the main character say, by the way, I have trauma and I have developed an alcohol problem.
I mean, like, that's essentially what he's saying. He's like, I drink a lot. So
Yeah.
there are bad things that have happened to me.
One of the things I also liked about that scene was the quick cutaway to the caravan, right? It was like, other than that, they're kind of two guys in a car. But they did that quick cutaway, and it's such an important establishing shot or telling the story that these aren't just two guys. These aren't unimportant people. Christopher Walken's character is established. He's not a little established. He has a whole caravan of cars that they're getting creasy with. So I think that one little shot tells so many stories.
Absolutely, John. I was going to bring that up if you did not bring it up. But to play devil's advocate, the reason why I really like is that Denzel is so open about his alcoholism. I think is that they set up that Denzel is a good guy. Like, there's nothing in him that he's lying to you. He is upfront about who he is and what he has done to pretty much everybody in this film. So I actually like that character trait that they put this in. There's no deception with Denzel throughout this entire film.
We disagree. No, I don't disagree with you either.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. I do understand that totally.
But I understand what you're saying too, Silvia. Sometimes stuff left off the page and then you get to absorb it through the spaces in the dialogue is also a very effective way. But personally, I just enjoy that he's open about it. It's kind of a cool character trait.
Yeah, and honestly, it makes sense, I think, for the pacing of this film. So if it was a little bit more contemplative or meditative, like, then maybe you'd have that. Maybe you'd have a moment like that between those two.
If I were to rewrite it in Silvia's brain, I think it would be something like Christopher Walken says to him, like, "Do you have that under control?" And he'd say, "No, I don't." There's something, he's still admitting it. But,
because that would tell you at least that's being honest as well. But
he's not bringing it up, right?
Now, originally back in the 80s, when Tony Scott was first developing the film, he had quite a few different actors that he wanted to play Denzel's role. Do you guys have any guesses who might fit the bill during that time frame? So this is going to be like 83 to like 85-ish.
Oh, for an action figure?
Were they looking specifically for an African-American action figure? Or?
No.
Okay,
So just
so
anyone
Matt Damon? That might have been a little early for
80s?
Matt Damon.
Arnold
Yeah.
Schwarzenegger?
Tom Cruise.
That would have been interesting. I mean, especially seeing that he chose Tom Cruise for, the character in Top Gun. I think Tom Cruise still might have been a little bit young, because I think in Top Gun he's pretty young. You would want someone that had been in military service, had lived a hard life, and then maybe got out. But
Tom Cruise was in military service in the movie Taps, if you don't remember that. And he had trauma there too.
You got me there, John.
Yes, that's
you
true.
definitely
Yes.
got me there. Let's see what Scott has to say about casting.
when I was going to make the movie back in the 80s in Italy, it was going to be Marlon Brando was our first choice, yeah. And then Marlon said, I'm a little bit too heavy, I think, to do all this physical activity. And I went from Marlon to Robert De Niro. And De Niro's attached, and then I didn't get to make the movie. I got to make Top Gun instead. So, and then it was funny when I was thinking about, after the call from Arnold Milchan, I think it was like 4 days later, asking me, this is in 2001, saying, was I still interested in making Man on Fire? I was sitting in a doctor's surgery getting acupuncture, and Denzel came in and sat opposite me. We both got sort of broken up bodies from old sports injuries, and he and I just sat and talked for 20 minutes, and I hadn't seen him since Crimson Tide. And as I was talking, I was thinking all the time about John Creasy, the lead in this movie. And I'd never thought of going that way when I was sitting doing my homework in my office at home, but sitting opposite Denzel, I said, wow, this would be really interesting having Denzel play this particular role. I didn't mention the film to him or say that I was interested in him using for the film, I just let it lie. And at the same time, I had Dakota Fanning in the back of my mind, so I thought the combination of Denzel Washington, who's this big black guy, and this tiny little porcelain white 9-year-old, I thought was a fantastic, really odd love story. And so that was how I cast those two people in the movie.
Now, as much as I would love to see a very heavy-set Marlon Brando in this role, I do think a late 80s, mid-80s Robert De Niro would have been a very good fit. What do you guys think?
It is interesting that he named like every heavy hitter. I thought he was going to say Sir Laurence Olivier next, because he's like Brando or De Niro, or who else could he say that's higher, more well-renowned than those guys?
I don't know, like Robert Duvall. I love that I said Arnold Schwarzenegger. The Terminator.
I mean, it would have a similar effect, this big hulking guy with this tiny little child.
It's the same idea, right? Yeah. At least Terminator 2, right? When he's the protector.
Arnold's a big star in the 80s. I mean, it wouldn't have been out of the question to have him do this. I mean, he would have fit in the role. You know who would have been an interesting choice too? Would have been William Peterson.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I really can't remember who else was really big in the 80s as like a...
Sylvester Stallone, Eddie Murphy, Harrison Ford. I just pulled up a quick list. Meryl Streep would have been great.
Yeah, Meryl Streep could have pulled it off, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Meryl Streep can pull anything off. That's the thing. She's amazing.
Could see Jack Nicholson.
Definitely Jack Nicholson. Harrison Ford, I mean, he did Patriot Games in the early 90s, the Jack Ryan characters. I mean, he could definitely do it for sure.
It's like someone has to have that, like, paternal instinct. You have to be able to kind of feel that. It's funny because I don't really feel that with Marlon Brando. Really interesting pick, actually, really, for him. I know he plays the Godfather, and he's like Vito Corleone. Interesting. Very interesting.
Have you protected a lot of children before, Mr. Creasy?
Creasy, you can call me Creasy. And no, you're the first.
Creasy. Bye, Creasy. Bye, Bird.
School tomorrow, peeps.
Does that mean we can get a dog? Dad promised me one when I went back to school.
Yeah, we'll see.
So I think is this the first time we see Dakota Fanning in this movie?
There's an introduction scene to the Ramos family where she first meets him, but this is the following scene where she takes him to his room.
I mean, this is where she is so natural, so likable, so vulnerable, so small, so articulate, so caring. Like she's like saying the line about, oh, he's sad or something. Like she knows like there's something more to it. I love the writing where she's calling him Mr. Creasy, and he says Creasy. That's just fantastic. Right away, you see a kid that's reaching out to somebody who previously had a bodyguard who she says is gone or left. But I think at this point in the audience, we know he's dead. He got killed in a kidnapping attempt previously, but she doesn't indicate here that she knows that that's what happened. Brilliant start to her performance here.
And not to mention the fact that she is 9 years old during the filming of the scene. I mean, obviously actors, it's their job to portray a character different than themselves, but I don't think a child pulls off the level of this character unless in real life they have this type of ability where they seem well older than their years. She's really holding her own against two-time Oscar winner, new Oscar winner for Best Actor coming off Training Day, Denzel. I mean, unbelievably impressive seeing her not act her way around Denzel, but on the same level as Denzel.
She's warm, she's intelligent, she has this intuition. Obviously, she can see through Creasy. That's the thing, which is, I mean, an ability like that when you're that young, just goes to show what kind of life you lived maybe up until that point. I mean, she lives in Mexico City with her family, and they hear the stories of the kidnappings every day. They're a wealthy family. She literally needs a bodyguard. There is a type of individual that you become when you realize that this is the life that you live.
Yeah, I mean, it makes you grow up pretty fast, right? Just from the get-go, knowing
For sure.
that you could be kidnapped. I can only imagine what type of psychological trauma that has on children who are even kidnapped in that area.
Yeah. She definitely has the emotional intelligence to go
And she
with.
does have, though, she also has her own street cred here, because I Am Sam in 2001, Sweet Home Alabama 2002. These aren't like, a minor child in the back row kind of a role. Uptown Girls, she was a co-lead. These are all movies that she made going into this movie. So she was already a veteran at this point. So I think it's although, did she film in Mexico City? Like, did she actually go to Mexico?
Oh, yeah.
Do we know?
Yep.
Yeah, they legit filmed in Mexico City, yeah.
Yep. And we have some stories about some real gunplay that goes on during the filming of this movie later in this episode.
I knew that they filmed in Mexico, and I knew that there was a lot of security issues, which I think we'll get into. But I didn't know if she had gone down there or not. But that she had already had an established career at that point. To be 9 years old and already made, this is her fourth major motion film. Not to mention her work in television before that.
Yeah, I mean, and Scott even mentions he already had Dakota in mind. Like, that's the thing. He was already well versed with like her previous work. So he saw her and was like, yeah, no, that this would be a perfect pairing. And she's absolutely endearing. She's super authentic. It's lovely to watch her. And heartbreaking.
And she's a perfect foil to Creasy, right? She is the opposite. She is welcoming and pulling in, and he is not welcoming and he's pushing away. So that's where they have to meet in the middle. So they couldn't have Creasy without her.
I'm being paid to be your bodyguard. Look at me. I'm not being paid to be your friend. I'm being paid to protect you. So no more questions. That's it. Period. You hear me?
Yes,
No crying.
I'm not crying.
Don't start. Gotta understand, this is a job in order for me to do nothing. Wait a minute.
Again, another scene where there are so many dynamics happening here between the filming style, the character interaction. This between Denzel and Dakota, it starts off obviously where Dakota is looking for a father figure. Her father is always away on business. She's looking for a friend. She's not even allowed to go to school. The only reason why she was able to go to school today is because they hired Denzel being the bodyguard. So this is like the father figure that she's looking for. But this scene is like a boxing match between this young, intuitive girl that's looking for a companion and Denzel. Like you said, John, he is the polar opposite of this. He is pushing her away at every turn. And eventually when they get into this argument, she turns away. He's kind of bullying her, saying, no crying, don't start. And then she, she's doing all she can as a, 9-year-old little girl. She hops out of the car in the middle of traffic and forces him to get out, playing her power position of, no matter what I do, you're going to have to protect me. And then she gets in the back of the car. And on top of that, you have this frenetic, frantic editing where, someone's washing the windshield. There's a car driving in front, running the red light. There's a dog running by, and it's just all this chaos. And he's pulling out his gun while he's boxing this little girl emotionally. A ton of things packed into this little sequence here.
I agree. I think it's done really well. What gets confusing, I think, sometimes with that camera movement for me is that is a lot of that in his head, or is it really happening? Because like the camera kind of, I mean, when he takes the gun out, I'm like, but is the gun out? I don't know if it's just like really the chaos in his mind as he's observing and experiencing this, or is it something that we are supposed to see physically? Like does Dakota Fanning's character see that? Does Peter see that?
Yeah, he just waved that gun around very quick and easy.
I mean, he really does, and I'm just kind of like, wait a minute, this is what irks me a little bit about that particular style of camera work. Like, I actually don't know what's real.
The thing that was for real was there was a clown in that scene, right? The thing right at the very beginning, there's a clown trying to wash the window or trying to like do some dance or something in front of the car, and it basically is the director's way to say Denzel is not in control right now. And actually, the biggest part of that scene that says he's not in control of himself or his surroundings is the sounds. There's so many beeps and honks and barking dogs and people saying words that we can't understand. That, and then all of a sudden, the little kid, the one thing he's supposed to do that he said, I'm not even going to be her friend, I'm just going to protect her, jumps out of the car. He is in zero control. So him drawing the gun, I think he did it a little early. I mean, they're trying to show you he's on his edge right now.
Yeah, and obviously, and who knows when he last had a drink, who knows what that obviously he's mentioned his reaction time being slower because of the drink. I agree with you totally, John. I think the sound design is the most important element here. I think if we just had sound, and I mean, we'd still have all the imagery and stuff, but yeah, pulling out the gun, I felt like, whoa, okay, here we go right now.
That elevated fast, right?
Yeah.
I do think the gun was a little overplay there. It's like twice in the movie he has to slam on his brakes, but at this juncture to just have window washers come to your car and start pulling guns on them, and pulling guns on a clown is not cool, man.
Not on a clown.
Never pull a gun on a clown. That's what my mom always said. I think what they're trying to establish here, right, is what both of you have already said, right? He's out of his comfort zone. He's trying to adapt to this situation here. Clown's washing your windshield and he's pulling out a gun because he doesn't know what the hell is happening. And speaking of gunplay, there wasn't only fake gunplay. There was real gunplay during the filming of this movie.
We were scouting locations one night in Neza, and I was priding myself that I was in the toughest barrio in Latin America when no police would go. And I was going, and it was 11 o'clock at night, and it's such an extraordinary location. I thought it's worth the risk. And yeah, sure enough, we got 10 kids around us with no shirts on and on crystal meth, and then there's 20 kids, and then there's 30 kids, and we got one bodyguard, and there's 5 of us, and then all of a sudden there was a Teamsters parking lot nearby, and there's like the old guys. We looked like good pickings because we had cameras and watches, and then these older guys, like in their 40s and 50s, started coming out, and then a bodyguard pulled his gun, and that was the sort of beginning of the end. It was like a sequence out of City of God. Suddenly there's 12 guns, yeah, and then it became a little hairy or a little scary, or however you want to put it. But our bodyguard pulled his gun, and that was a mistake because all of a sudden there's all these other guns, and everybody's screaming and yelling, and then a squad car came out of nowhere. This one cop jumped out asking our bodyguard for his gun. It was a true Mexican standoff, and in the middle of all of that, they jumped him, grabbed him, they pistol whipped him. They broke his nose, knocked all his teeth out, and yeah, and there was blood everywhere, and they beat the living daylights out of the cop as well. The cop crawled his car and drove off. In the middle of all this mayhem, we escaped up onto an overhead walkway, and they had him on the floor with his T-shirt pulled over his white T-shirt, which was then just covered in blood, and they had this gun at his head and were threatening to shoot him unless we came down. We were right inside the movie. Anyhow, somehow, I won't bore you with all the rest of the details, but it worked out and we got him out, yeah, and he was fine. Other than having new front teeth put in, his nose rebuilt. But anyhow, in the studio heard about that. They said, "You're out of here. That's it. I'm not shooting in Mexico anymore," because they never wanted to go to Mexico anyhow.
I'm glad he didn't bore us with the details. I mean,
well, I know he's like, "I won't bore you with the rest of the detail." I'm like, "What?"
in looking into the film a little bit while we've been talking here, because insurance is an interest of mine. It does say the insurance rate for all their cameras and equipment was much higher than it was on almost any other production, and that was actually one of their biggest costs. So,
I mean, because you gotta assume, first of all, they might get stolen or broken, right? Like, clearly, obviously. Wow.
and they didn't have just one camera to steal; they had 20 cameras to steal and film stock, and it must have been a nightmare.
I wonder if anyone quit. I wonder if any of the crew members quit.
I mean, also, too, I mean, it's kind of like this thing where, you know, the crazy genius director thing. It's like, where he's like, oh, I felt like so badass being in one of the worst barrios because it was such a cool scene. It's like, dude, like, that is very reckless to be bringing people that are on a film set with you into this environment. It's like, oh, we have one bodyguard with you. It's like, yeah, great. Think about what happened when you had one bodyguard there and just 5 people. You're going to bring A-list actors and an entire crew with you into these dangerous barrios. I mean, I did read some interviews where he was really impressed with The City of God, which came out around this time. Maybe he was trying to emulate some of that, but man, like when you have the lives of crew members, you do need to take that into account. It's not a movie all the time. You know, it is real life.
Yeah. I mean, that poor guy had his nose broken and teeth knocked out, and he at gunpoint.
I mean, was he a grip? Because a grip can take it. I'm sorry. What was their job?
Oh my, that was great, John. That was great. That was great. Grips out there, we love you. You're the best.
That's intense, yes. And you do have to have more care and respect for your crew. I mean, you bring them to some areas that can be, you know, they're a little dubious. You know, there's you know that there's more crime in this area, so you just have to be careful. And especially you're going someplace where you already know that there's like so many kidnappings. Like there's always people out there waiting to grab someone, to snatch someone.
The main reason you made the movie is all the kidnappings that you read about. And you're like, yeah, let's go in the middle of that. It is interesting because it's not like if this was his second film or his first real foray into like a big budget film, I could understand it. But he had already done Top Gun, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, this is 2004. He's done a ton of films at this point.
So he had advisors. He had people, you know, that were by his side saying, hey, maybe we've got this nice little village that's near Mexico City that's a little safer, or how about downtown LA or something like that. It's just, as a producer, you really have to make sure that your crew and your actors and your talent, everybody's safe and secure.
Yeah,
not that, hey,
sure.
I think maybe filming in Mexico City is perfectly fine. I don't know the current status there. But yeah, you just want to make sure you have enough security.
I agree.
And
I think
enough
because
grips
of this,
to take them on.
we all know what this film is about. You're going into an area that's specifically like it's true to the area. It's authentic. I get it. You want an authentic setting, but then comes the authentic experiences.
And speaking about experiences, now we have one of the pivotal scenes in the first act of this film where John Creasy, our lead, Denzel Washington, is attempting suicide.
Hey, listen, you ever have a 9mm round that didn't go off?
Oh, yeah. Failure to fire.
I know, failure to fire, and you know, I pulled the trigger and clicked, nothing.
You're talking about a bad primer.
Yeah, but you know, right, dimple on the primer, bad, maybe.
Well, like we used to say, bullet always tells the truth.
The film changes the rhythm when Rayburn is sort of interacting, I think, with Creasy. Like it just seems like the editing slows, the camera kind of lingers a little bit more, which is not something you see very often in this film, you know? So the noise fades. Like, I really do think like there's a breath here. The movie breathes, these characters breathe. And I think that there's a bit of a fragility, obviously, that we get in this film that you don't see in a lot of the other sequences, especially the action sequences. So I do think that Rayburn, as well as PETA, they anchor him.
So I actually have a question on this one. So where we see Creasy in the rain, outside, there's almost like a painted villa or village outside, and it's almost like Disney World kind of a feel, not just a fake facade. Do you guys feel there was any intentional purpose to that specific look and feel?
It's funny. I noticed that too, and I was like, this must have been intentional to make it feel like a fairy tale at one point, or going. I don't know, because it was very unique. The colors seemed very different. Like it totally took like a different visual approach than what
And
we've
also the
seen.
heavy rain coming down, and also like
Yeah.
him silhouetted against the moonlight shining on the trees. Like this is a very stylized scene. It definitely stands out from the other scenes that we've seen previously for sure. I didn't get the feel that was like kind of like a fake facade, but I definitely noticed the visual change for sure. And also as you said, Sylvia, the thing that I really love about this scene is that the dynamics between Denzel's character and Christopher Walken's character is so poignant. Like it's a real love story, not only between Dakota and Denzel, but it's also between Denzel and Christopher Walken's character. You can tell that they have been through shit. They both care about each other. And when real shit is going down, he's actually there to talk to him and maybe throw him a little joke too at the same time. It's like, as opposed to being like these big tough guys that are just, throwing people off buildings and, shooting guns, one in each hand. This is a powerful relationship in this film.
And I completely agree. Yeah, it's so effective, I think, because the juxtaposition with all of the really quick cuts and everything, and like the frenetic editing, and then just like the bombastic kind of sound design. You have this moment that literally it cuts into classical music, and then there's this quietness. And you know what? Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, when we're talking about the scene where it's raining, right? He's outside, he's on the phone, and you're talking about what he's looking off into the distance. It actually does feel like a staged production. It starts
Yep.
to feel like he's actually now on the theater, like in the theater.
And who do you have looking down on this whole scene is Dakota looking out of the window. It's such a poignant ending to this scene. And then we'll see the following scenes where they start actually developing a friendship.
Okay, like nowadays in the West, they have one husband for one wife, but in the olden time cultures, they had, different rules. Why, you feel sorry for the husband?
Yeah, can you imagine my mom multiplied by 1,000? Gracie, you're smiling.
What?
You were smiling.
No, I'm not.
You were.
No, I was not.
You're not now, but you were.
No, you were smiling. I wasn't
You
smiling.
were.
When?
Like 5 seconds ago.
Dakota's amazing in that.
I love that scene so much.
And the whole you're smiling and then the little quick back and forth, that was all improvised by them on set. Pretty
Love it.
great dynamics between the both of them. I was thinking that during that scene, guys, I love this film. I love this film. There are so many moments in this film. I mean, this has so many opportunities to be the standard action revenge movie that's just, guns blazing. There's so much depth to these characters. I mean, obviously, a lot of the heavy lifting is being done by Dakota Fanning here, who honestly should have won an Oscar for this performance. But I mean, it's a combination, right, of also the directing allowing them to make these moments and make them seem real, but it's also the screenwriting. They're writing what's going to happen down the screen, and they're letting them evolve inside of that with the director. But also too, it's like the way that they have these shots set up where they do have the frenetic editing and stuff, but just like we saw with the suicide scene, this is a very poignant scene where they're slowing everything down. And then you're having Denzel having to also be a bodyguard mentally for this young child who's asking about concubines, right? He doesn't know how to answer these things. And he's like, this is where you actually see him having to deal with stuff that a father would deal with, right? And it does such a great job of developing this dynamic between both of them without kind of being ham-fisted and just jamming it down your throat.
Yeah, it feels authentic. It feels like a real moment of two people getting to know each other and honestly feeling each other out. Watching this like sort of blossom, their relationship blossom is this is just one of my favorite scenes. This is one of my favorite scenes.
So I have to go back a little bit because there's two scenes that we really didn't cover. And this is the 12-hour podcast. So the scene after, which we saw earlier, where she jumps out of the car and she more or less goes in the back seat and says, fine, I don't want you to be my friend. You can be my employee. Great. And we fast forward to the next scene where the mother goes in and talks to him to try and see if, hey, can you be more of a friend? And she goes down on his levels. There's so many things about that scene I really love. And he ultimately rejects her. It's immediately after that that he goes to try and commit suicide in the movie, not time-wise. And so he's kind of come to two people reaching out as hard as they could to him, and he's rejected them, and then he's rejected himself. And then he all of a sudden realizes that he maybe is being a little too hard on the situation, or he's just, I think, having a certain revelation that he can't even kill himself. That's how failed he is right now. He can't even kill himself. So, which is great. We're glad, because the movie would have been much shorter. But the scene before this, we see him alone in the pool, sitting off to the side. He is in a single column of light. He is very isolated, but he watches Dakota at a swim meet. It's in that time that he sees somebody who needs his help, not just for protection, but he sees she needs his help in becoming a better swimmer. And that's the first moment that he walks over and he reaches down his hand to help her get out of the pool. And Tony Scott does a slow motion movement of his hand reaching down to hers, where he's now reaching back out to them. And this is the scene that we just watched, which is immediately, I think, after that, where he's now turned a page to say, I can try and help. He went really fast into the concubine question. That was really fun to go into that.
But now he has a purpose, right? He has a purpose in life. Now he sees that he can actually be a help to Dakota without just being the employee, the hired protection, right?
And I think there's that moment that you were talking about, John, in the scene when the mother approaches him and is just kind of like, look, she just wants a friend. And he's like, I'm not hired to be a friend. She asks him again if he has any kids. And he actually says, he's like, I already told you. I told you I don't have kids. It's that moment of her having to ask again to make him see a little bit of what this dynamic really needs to be. You're not just a bodyguard, man. Like, you gotta have a little bit more instinct to care. So, it's not just the job to protect. It is also the job to care.
So now we have all of this happening, right? We've established the friendship. They now have purpose. So what has to happen? Now we are 54 minutes into this film. Honestly, for this film being 2 hours and like 20 something minutes long, when I'm watching this, it doesn't feel that long. I think it was a very smart decision to take the first hour to set up this introduction between the characters, allow you to sit in their lives, allow them to have these character arcs, because what's going to happen next? It's going to be PETA is going to be kidnapped.
In this sequence, what I love specifically too, I mean, the editing for me is not as crazy as it is in the opening, which I actually really appreciate. I think it works very well with what we're about to, see. I think the sound design in this scene is phenomenal. I think when the church bells, like we heard them in the opening credits, right? We know it signifies, hey, it's not people getting out of church or going to church. This means something bad is going to happen. So there's foreshadowing here using the sound design, which I thought was really brilliant. And then as the kidnapping conspires or takes place, you hear as the shots ring out, we hear that Creasy he got shot. And after he gets shot, we hear that amazing sound design where it sounds like a beating heart. as and it's like a slow motion scene here where he's like falling to the ground. I think this is well crafted here. John, you have thoughts?
Yeah, I do agree that it is crafted really well. The faces on Dakota are phenomenal. She expresses this incredible fear. I do have some question marks on just the story plot. And the first thing I think of is this is the first time we've ever seen him walk the dog. So as soon as we see him walking the dog, as a matter of fact, the dog wasn't even in the movie in the beginning. I'm curious if they actually give the dog to Dakota like midway through the film as a present for some reason. So clearly then all of a sudden the dog is a little bit of a distraction. As soon as I saw him walking a dog, I was like, this is something obviously going to happen. They're kind of deliberate in that though. So it's not like they're trying to hide, hey, something's going to go bad. He's also aware of it. The other major thing I have in watching this is he gets shot a lot in this scene. He didn't get shot like, in the arm or on the leg. He gets shot like 2, 3, 4 times on the chest. I'm amazed at the medical world down in Mexico City. They have some great doctors because if he survived that, I'm just stunned.
I mean, and they talk about the fact that he probably should have been dead, but somehow he is miraculously alive.
He is. And the other, I guess the other pet peeve, again, I agree with you, Silvia. I think this scene is absolutely brilliant, and I think it should be studied and used. Earlier in the film, we have the big to-do about the gunshot, that the gunshot will set you free, the gunshot will set you free. He does do the gunshot, and right here, I'm like, okay, that's her motivation to run. But then they downplay that, and she actually comes back to be abducted. So I think it loses a lot of its worth, and I don't think it ever comes back really later in the movie. Like it never winds up saving her in any way, shape, or form that I'm aware of. So I feel that they lost that scene. They had a great setup for something dramatic and positive to happen, and then they just let it go.
I think that's a fair criticism, John. I think once he gets shot, I think it's that whole connection of everything is stopped for her. You know, she is only worried about her father figure here, Denzel, and she wants to help him, which inevitably leads to her being kidnapped. And as far as the dog, I also had the same thoughts, John. When I was rewatching it today, actually, I realized the through line of this dog. At the very beginning, when they're talking about, we're going to get a new bodyguard, she's like, now that I can go back to school, does that mean I can get a new dog? And she's like, we'll see. And then when her father comes back from the second business trip of this movie, he brings a dog along with him and gives it to her. That's kind of a makeup present of, hey, I know I haven't been here. So that's the through line of the dog. We don't see the dog on the rest of this film. But,
never again.
But now we know the full through line of the dog, and the dog doesn't die. You never kill the dog. So we know that.
Well, I mean, do we know? He might be in the car dead. I don't know.
Well, we don't know. Did he just like run off? Like
Man on Fire 2. All right, guys, there is so much happening in the film. I think we're going to have to stop this episode here.
It's that frenetic style that Tony Scott has. It's just everywhere. There's too much to talk about.
I'm actually recording right now with 12 different webcams. This episode's going to be bonkers.
I mean, I feel it, guys. I feel it. So yeah, no, I'm ready. I'm ready to take this energy and bring it back.
All right, everyone. So please tune in to our next episode where we talk about the conclusion to Man on Fire.
You've been listening to the Is It Streaming podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, like and subscribe on your podcast channel of choice. Be sure to leave a review worthy of Siskel and Ebert, and share episodes with your friends, family, and the cinephiles in your life. Is It Streaming is part of the Writer's Bone podcast network, founded by yours truly, Daniel Ford. In addition to our flagship show, Writer's Bone, the network features Film Freaks Forever, As Told To, the Ghostwriting Podcast, The Thoughtful Bro, and the Movie Loft Podcast. Sensing a theme? Writing and storytelling are in our DNA. Go to writersbone.com to learn more. Once again, thanks for listening. See you next time.